Here at Flow FM, we're speaking now with Matt Dalgleish from Thomas Elder Markets. Thanks for joining us on Flow.
No problems, Ricky.
We have been tracking over the whole year just these amazing movements on both the beef price and the sheep price. Now, beef cattle has certainly moved in incredible directions. Where is that sitting at the moment on the beef price, first of all?
So if you're looking at young cattle, prices have been the one that's been really noticeable because of the restocking activity. And young cattle on the eastern seaboard, I guess, is sitting above $10 now. So $10.32 or 33 is the price as of now. Cents a kilo carcass weight.
Yep, and that's been sort of tracking up. It hit that sort of ceiling about a month or so ago. It was dropping off, but then there was this whole betting game. I mean, Wayne and I were talking on the air about whether we'd get there by Christmas or by the AFL Grand Final. We got there a lot sooner. What was the driver of that?
Look, it's really been, most of the season has been a story of restocking and that kind of activity to rebuild the herd. And that's what's been driving the pricing. That last kind of push towards, above $10. Look, it really was the northern buyers. So actually, up in Queensland and northern New South Wales, they were quite aggressively chasing stock. And that was what kind of pushed it up through that $10 level.
Yeah, is a really interesting comment because a mate of my son's, they run cattle out near Caneton, and they went driving, didn't even take any animals, just went driving up to Queensland to just see what the market was like before they headed up there. So clearly the word on the ground is that there's some good prices on offer up there.
Yeah, that's right. Look, there are patches in Queensland in the west that are still actually kind of struggling a bit with rainfall. So it's a bit, there are spots that are a bit patchy, but broadly there are enough areas there that have had a really good season, like in the south, and that's been enough, to get this market really going. New South Wales is the other, northern New South Wales, which was heavily affected by the drought in 2019. They saw some fairly significant restocking as well, and they've had a really good season this year.
Yeah, I just noticed on Thursday the rain dumped about 40-something mils in 24 hours near Roma, so maybe there's even more price optimism there if that's helped things out.
Look, it's one of those things now that, if you look globally though, where our prices here are reaching near to ceilings. Really, I think there's only limited topside now. As we kind of head towards the end of the year, just because of what's happening in the global space.
Yeah, we'll talk maybe about where things are heading in a moment, but just can we track across just on the sheep side of things? Now, there usually is a sort of fallback going into spring, but now they're sort of coming on the new lambs and the prices started moving up again. Is that right?
Yeah, look, the big kind of flow of lambs tends to come in Victoria, as in spring. That's where the bulk kind of tend to come this time of the year. We have started to see a little bit of a pickup about a fortnight ago. They started to increase, but last week they dropped away again, which is uncharacteristic for this time of year to see that kind of decline. So we have seen prices kind of stretch a bit higher again, and the Eastern States Trade Lamb Indicator is sitting around 9.40 cents a kilo. Carcass weight, so which is given we're just about to head into October and we've still got a 9 in front of our trade lamb indicator. That's pretty remarkable. But I suspect that as those numbers start to present, particularly in Victoria, we are going to start to see some price pressure there.
Yeah, well, the restock of lamb price just seems to bounce around pretty heavily in the different states. It's one week it's well over 1,000, the other week it pulls back by a significant figure. Why is it doing that?
Look, that's one that has traditionally it does have a bit of volatility. I think it can be the vagaries of the weather sometimes can influence that as well. And we have seen a bit of at one stage there it looked like the La Nina was starting to roll off this season, and there was some discussion that we might be heading back to more normalised rainfall patterns, and then within about a month or two the weather systems had all changed again, and now it looks like we're going to have a very wet end to the year, and spring, at least certainly in the East Coast, it's been forecast for the next 3 months to see some fairly significant rainfall through to spring. So that's kind of got people fired up again, I think, and it's one of those things where that restocker price can often be influenced, and the behaviour of restockers can be influenced by what they think is going to happen weather-wise. And so that's part of the reason why we see a little bit more volatility there.
Okay, well, casting our eyes to the future, we can swing back to talking about beef. Where is this price going? Is there ceiling? I mean, we're all guessing here, but you're much better placed than I am to make a prognosis about where it's heading.
Yeah, look, I think we are at levels, that are near that top for this season. We've got there was a couple of things actually internationally that allowed pricing to lift a little bit in the last month or so. But even though we had those factors, we haven't seen huge surges higher, and I think that's part of the reason, because we're at these record levels. But internationally, we did see a bit of a supply chain disruption to Brazil. So Brazil had
Was there mad cow cases?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And a couple of outbreaks of mad cow disease, and that impacted their ability to export. And then a few of the big kind of destinations for Brazilian beef decided they were going to hold off. So
I think the Chinese decided, we'll take a step of caution here.
Yeah, that's right. China, not just China. There was also, a couple of the Middle Eastern customers and a few other East Asian customers that just said they'll just hold for a bit, and so that caused a bit of a flurry in kind of international markets with a concern around supply. And we also had the overlay of Argentina, which is another kind of competitor to Australia in a few key markets, particularly China's one. They've been having issues with food inflation domestically, so they decided to curb their exports of beef, I should say. And so that also kind of added to that lack of kind of global supply, and that allowed for global prices to push up a little bit, and then it gave some room locally for prices to increase as well. But moving forward though, I think these supply disruptions will iron themselves out, and we'll start to get to a situation where that global supply, in terms of their short-term hiccup, tends to even out. We've also got, as we move into next year, domestically, we are in a herd rebuild, so we are going to see an increase to the herd over this year, and then what comes with that is obviously as the herd gets bigger, we'll start to be able to see our slaughter numbers increase. So by about 2023, we're forecasting, or MLA are forecasting, Meat and Livestock Australia are forecasting the herd back to around 28 million head, and slaughter back up into the kind of mid to high 7 million per annum, and with numbers up there and kind of that supply situation domestically getting back to more normalised levels, that is going to probably lead to some price pressure. So we're not talking a market collapse, but we're probably talking a reduction in pricing over into 22, 23 of 5 to 15%, from these levels, these current levels.
Yeah, I think you published a story on Thomas Elder Market's website about the slaughter numbers being quite low compared to the trend.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so the lowest slaughter numbers we're seeing now in decades. MLA, as part of their outlook for this current season, have reduced their estimate down to 6.3 million head for this year, for 2021. But where we're tracking at the moment, we're going to need to see a bit of an increase in slaughter for this last kind of quarter of the year to get to that level. And I'm a bit, I don't think we'll get there actually, unless we see a real uptick in slaughter, over the next few months. I suspect we're going to probably come in at the end of this year, maybe in the low 6 million head, 6.1 or 6, or potentially maybe even below 6 million head, 5.9 is which, if we get to that level, it's really going to demonstrate just how tight this season was, and go to show why we've seen such record prices this year.
Okay, and now on the sheep and lamb front, where do you see things heading there?
A bit of a different picture in terms of the broader outlook for the next few years. With like I said, with cattle, there's some headwinds into the future in terms of our increase to our kind of herd size, and the fact that our global price is well above where it normally is. And so, when things normalise here in terms of herd and slaughter, that price is looking to decline. The situation with sheep and lamb is a little bit different, and part of that is because we've still got tight supply, of course, but the sheep and lamb situation is such that there's really only two main providers of sheep and lamb to the global market, and it's us and New Zealand. And New Zealand, they're in a situation where they're actually still focusing more in terms of enterprise towards beef and dairy. So they're kind of in a phase where they're still declining their flock, and they're having less available, I guess, for export. And so
that sounds almost unthinkable. The Kiwis backing away from sheep.
Yeah, no, they've been doing it for the last decade, though. If you look at each of the year, their breeding ewe numbers have been declining, and then that kind of, even though they're quite good at producing lambs from a smaller kind of number of ewes, their marking rates are very high. Certainly compared to Australia as well, they get real success in getting good numbers there. They are seeing their lamb crop reduce as well, and then that's at the moment that's still forecast to go the same way. So they're still favouring dairy and cattle. But what it means from a global perspective, you've got the overlay of that tightening supply, and if you extend it beyond just Australia and New Zealand and look at, say, the 10 biggest exporting nations of sheep meat, most of those countries are at a stage where they've declined. So the global flock that's available for export is at record lows. And it has been for nearly the last decade. So it is very much a picture of tight supply in that sheep and lamb space globally. But the overlay of that too is we're seeing it's a marketplace that has a lot of opportunity for growth, particularly in traditional markets like the Middle East, as we move away from the COVID economic problems and the world starts to become more active again in terms of commerce. Things are going to pick up, like travel and tourism and stuff like that, and that kind of increases the demand for things like fuels and whatnot, and that means money flowing back to those Middle Eastern sectors that supply the world with a lot of fuel, and therefore they're spending more as well. So that's a good sign for the global economy in that part of the world, and that means increased consumption of all products, but one will be kind of meat products. But then you've got in North America, we've got a growing market there, and the changing dynamic of the North American population increases a lot of subcontinental Indian people into America. The Mexicans are quite a big eater of mutton and lamb, so and then they're kind of still growing in terms of their population in that space. So North America over the last few years has been a market that's increasing in their demand for sheep meat product, and that's set to continue. And then you've got, of course, the story of China and broader Asia and the growth in that area in terms of both population and wealth. That's another market that's a huge market for growth potential. So
lots of upside on the demand side, upside on the supply. Well, upside for us on the supply side. Are you willing to throw a percentage figure where you think things might go?
Yeah, look, the modelling for at least next year, we've got about a 10 to 15% higher prices across the board than what we saw this year. And that's a dynamic of, even though we are growing the flock here and we are going to start to see increased production here as the flock grows, because the rest of the world is basically not as focused on what's happening, and that global picture is still going to stay tight. We're in a situation where demand is going to probably continue to outstretch supply, at least for the next 5 years and maybe for the next decade. So we've got a situation where it's highly likely we'll still see the ebbs and flows through the season of kind of peaks and troughs. So it's not the prices won't ever go down, but the broader trend for sheep meat is still looking like we're going to continue to see growth at least into that next 5 years or potentially longer in terms of overall pricing. Average pricing looks like it's likely to grow. So I wouldn't be surprised if by the middle of the year, we're regularly seeing trade lamb prices, above $10 carcass weight, maybe even as high as $11 or $12 potentially, through that kind of peak of the season.
Yep. Well, all that talk about lambs got me thinking about those lamb chops sitting in my fridge, and they're almost like toilet paper by the sounds of all of that. They could be a good investment product in the freezer.
Look, they've certainly become, it used to be the case that lamb was the traditional Sunday meal that you had, and it was a much cheaper cut to have. It was the red meat that you could go and have, as a dinner or a lunch, and be, kind of happy that it was much cheaper than beef. But we're in a situation now where it's very much becoming a prestige product, not just in Australia, but globally, and that's going to be reflective of the price.
Yep, well, thanks, Matt. You're just making me hungry now, so we better stop there. Thanks a lot. That's a great analysis for us from Thomas Elder Markets. Your website, if people want to get the latest analysis on a range of commodities?
Yeah, it's thomaseldermarkets.com.au. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's got a lot of stuff on there. Obviously, all totally free, no hidden catches, Ricky. You can just jump on and find out about lots of agricultural products.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. Matt Dalgleish from Thomas Elder Markets. Thanks for joining us today.
Cheers, Ricky.